If you're just joining me, I'm just getting set up a little bit. I'm actually ready to start, but I'm just checking a couple things and then we will get right to it. Okay, so if you're just joining, as I would have mentioned on all of my social media, I am starting the Humanality Project, which is a totally new project that I'm doing to teach the basics of design and keeping your designs consistent and using commonality to achieve that. Also, you'll be able to learn how to achieve diversity with commonality and consistency. So we're gonna get right into it. As you can see, I already have Inkscape open. For those of you who have not used Inkscape before, don't worry, it's not as intimidating as it looks. It is a very complex program, but it's not nearly as intimidating as it looks. So I'm going to show you the basics over time, and I'll also be posting some tutorials on Inkscape on my YouTube channel. So if you are not subscribed to me on YouTube as yet, make sure you go and subscribe so that you can catch all of them when they drop. But first of all, let me just run through what the Humanality Project is. It's going to be basically a wide-ranging project which will cover aspects of basic design in just a general sense. Then I'll also be doing some web design projects and some other projects as I feel the inspiration. I'm kind of a person who doesn't really go from notes and all that stuff. I just go with the flow, but I'm trying to keep this a little more structured for your sakes so that you can actually learn from me this time. So it's going to be more or less a course. I'm going to run it on my streams and then post it on YouTube where you can catch it at your own convenience. So as you can see here, I have a face what at least looks somewhat like a human, except he has no ears. And you will notice that certain elements remain consistent because all of the features of this face are made from the same element except for the nose, The nodes I just drew by hand after I was done. But all of them are circles. So if I were to open this layer here, which is the base, you can actually select each one of these elements and you'll see they're all circles, basically. This here was actually, the mouth was actually made from circles as well, but I'll explain what I did with that eventually. It's not a circle on the page right now anymore because I've turned it into an actual object or path that you can edit with the node editor, but it's originally made from circles. So basically, the point of all that is all of these elements remain consistent, and it uses design commonality. Design commonality basically meaning that you're using the same elements over and over again to achieve different results, and consistency meaning that if I were to show you, for example, the other faces that I did, like the disappointed face and a cutesy face and a wondering face, you'll see that all of them look very similar. And there's also this face that I used on the image for my channel, or my channels, because I have two of them. But this face is also using the same basic concept. So all of these elements are made from the same elements that you would have seen on this face and all the others that I just showed you. So as I told you, we're going with commonality and consistency and achieving diversity. Okay, and as I always say on all of my streams, the basis of this is your stacking simplicity. So when you stack simplicity, you start with some very basic concepts and you just keep adding layers and layers and layers on top of them. And you can see that throughout nature. Nature is built from very simple elements. You have atoms, and atoms are built from even more basic elements, which I won't go into that science, and I'm not doing science this evening, but as you would understand, nature is built from that, and then you build from there. So from atoms you go to molecules, from molecules then you go to cells, from cells then you go to organisms. Well, that would be multicellular organisms or unicellular organisms or what may have you, and then from organisms you go to societies, and from societies, and of course you can talk about human beings. We have our nations and we have our federations and all these other things. So same thing is true when you're doing design. Design is basically stacking simplicity, at least in its most basic form. If you want to complicate it, because obviously everyone is different, you could put that in other ways, but when you really break it down to its basic elements, that's all design is. So for this course or this project that I'm doing, what I want to teach you is how to stack simplicity but still maintain consistency and commonality. So we're always going to be using basic elements that don't change. For example, as I would have shown you, we're using circles to build all these elements you see here. Even these elements in his eyes are also made from circles. So everything is using commonality and everything remains consistent. Okay, so with all that said, I'm going to show you a basic design that is going to follow these same principles. I'm not going to create exactly what I have here, obviously, but I'm going to create something very similar. So I open a new document and I'm going to add a circle. Now obviously this circle is a little oblong because that's pretty similar to how his face is shaped, but it is a circle as far as Inkscape is concerned. Then I'm going to select this, duplicate it, rotate it once 90 degrees, move it upward. It doesn't have to be in an exact position because we're going to select everything then, and then we're going to align and distribute. And I have biggest object selected as the relative alignment that you're using, and then we're going to center on the vertical axis. Once you do that, go to path, union, which will join those two circles, and then we can go to node editing. Now I know I'm moving a little fast, but I'm just trying to give you a basic idea of what I did to create this face. So when you go to the node editor, you'll see that we have some points here that you can move around. The first thing that you want to do is, oops, Inkscape is being a little special. Oh, I forgot to mention this before I started. The version of Inkscape that I'm using is a development build, so there are going to be some bugs. And that's because I typically like to use software on the cutting edge. That's just my personal preference. You don't have to do that, and I would recommend, if you're using Inkscape for production purposes, unless you're really skilled and know what you're doing, use a stable build. So use version 1.1 or version 1 instead of using what I'm using, which is version 1.2 from a nightly channel. So yeah, that aside, just want you to know, if you see any mistakes or any errors occurring due to the application itself, that is just because I'm using a development build. Okay, so as I said, the next thing, or as I was saying, the next thing you would want to do is to auto smooth all of these nodes, which is what I did here. So you select them and then you press make nodes auto smooth, and then some of these nodes are redundant, because if you look at the, oh wait, I selected the wrong scene, sorry about that. Right, if you look at any of these faces, you'll see that they have a kind of smooth edge on either side. So a lot of these points that we would have created are unnecessary. They're not really going to serve any purpose. So we're actually going to remove them. And first I'm going to select, in fact you can select any of these, but I'm going to select the ones up here, delete those. And you'll see these are no longer exactly auto smooth, that's no problem. These two I'm going to merge, and these two I'm going to merge. Then I'm going to select everything, turn them back to corners. Oh wait, let me actually delete different nodes and not join those together, because it created some issues. And that's no problem. Sometimes when you're designing, you have to take a step back and start again. So that's what I'm going to do here. Instead of joining those nodes together, I'm just going to delete these nodes altogether, because sometimes it gives you some issues. So I'm going to set these back to corner again, just to make sure that everything is straight, and then auto smooth. And now you have a basic shape that you can work with. And as I would have mentioned earlier, I'm not trying to exactly replicate the faces that I'm using in the Humanality Project, but I'm just trying to give you a basic idea of how it works. And the reason I'm not directly replicating them at this point in time is because I want to encourage you, when you actually try to replicate this, even if you do it on paper, because you don't have to use these concepts that I'm teaching you in Inkscape itself, you can use them in any form of design. But when you replicate these concepts, I want you to iterate upon them and create your own diversity, because everyone's designs are unique. Okay, so as I was saying, I'm not going to directly replicate what I created, but I'm going to create something pretty similar. So we're going to select these nodes here on either side, make sure that they are aligned to each other. They are, but they don't necessarily look that way, at least me looking at them. Oh wait, let me switch back to the scene, sorry about that. They don't exactly look aligned, but they are aligned. Sometimes your brain can play some mind tricks on you. So I'm going to move these down, not too far of course, because we want to maintain a certain shape. Then I'm going to hold the shift key and selecting these handles on either side, I'm going to bring them in a little bit, make the face a little thinner. And this is a little bit closer now to what I created for the Humanality Project. Alright, returning to Inkscape now, I'm going to select the colors. So I'm going to fill and stroke. Let me just make sure this page is fully visible. Right, fill and stroke, and for fill, I'm going to drag this all the way up to the 100% marker, so that luminosity is 100% and the object is white. Then we're going to turn stroke on. You don't want it to be so thick, but Right, just make sure that it is at 0 for luminosity, because our face is going to have a totally black outline. And then over on stroke style, you can bring it down to something a lot thinner than what I have here. So I'm going to go down to probably 2.376, and it doesn't have to be that exact number, by the way. I just tend to use particular numbers. So there's a reason for that as well, which I will explain both in this stream and other streams. That's consistency, okay? Oh, hi, Cassie Codes. Good to see you. One of the people who inspires me, for those who don't know. I always like to show how people who inspire me, and it's amazing that I actually have people who inspire me following me and watching my stuff. I feel kind of not really nervous, but I feel kind of excited about that. So hi. And yes, it is good to see some open source software. I always use open source software. For those who don't know, I don't have any proprietary software whatsoever, and it's not that I have anything against it, just that it's my personal preference, and I'm more comfortable with open source software. I've had the opportunity to use other options, wasn't satisfied, wasn't that interested, and they're expensive, so I stick with open source wherever possible. So getting back to this design here, just to make sure everything is centered on the page itself. Should have done that earlier, by the way, but I didn't. Right, and next thing I want to do here is add a shadow. So I'm going to duplicate this object, then turn off the fill. For the stroke style, now I'm going to add a gradient, and I'm going to turn on the grid using the shift key and the pound key, which should be 3 on my keyboard, but it will be different if you have a different layout, obviously. Then you go to edit gradient, and you're going to take this point here on the left, which is where the gradient starts, bring it down to the bottom, take this point here that was on the right, bring it over the top a little lower down. Now at this point the gradient is not visible because it's overlaid on top of the other gradient. If I were to change these colors to say like red or something, you'd actually see it, but that's not really important. You just need to know where it is according to these points. So we're going to turn the grid back off. As you'll notice, Inkscape is not always responding when I choose select mode, because as I would have mentioned at the start, I'm using a development build and there are some bugs, so I have to switch back and forth occasionally. That won't happen if you're using a stable build, by the way. And we're going to turn on blur on this. You should begin to see it appearing a little bit. If it's not visible, we just have to make the stroke style larger than it is. So I'm going to turn it up until that shadow begins to become visible. And then we're going to move it to the bottom, so lower selection at the bottom. And there we go. Now if you look back at the Humanality Project, you will notice that there is a little shadow at the bottom of her face. And that is part of the consistency that I want to maintain on all of these faces that we create. So now we're going to add some eyes. Again, using always the same shapes, basic shapes. So we're not adding any squares, we're not adding any rectangles, not adding any stars, anything like that. Always circles, because we're teaching consistency and commonality. Commonality being that you use similar elements, and consistency being that if you look at any of these faces that we create, that they always have certain things that don't change. Okay, so always going to add circles to the eyes. I'm going to turn off stroke, turn on the fill. Oh, just a second, my music stopped and I'm not sure why. Oh, I forgot that Firefox has a tab suspender plugin installed and it turned my music off. Sorry about that. There we go. So right, you'll notice this circle is invisible. That's because Inkscape always uses the last color that I would have selected if I have that enabled in my preferences. So I'm going to just turn the opacity back up to 100% on each slider, and the eye color I normally use here for the Humanality project is completely black. The hair is dark grey, so we're going to leave the eyes as black. I'm just going to resize this, hold the shift key and hold this handle and resize it. Now why I'm holding the shift key is that we'll resize around the center, so no matter where I use this, it's not going to move it on the page. If I release shift and I resize it, see what happens? Moves it from the center to somewhere else, and I don't want that. So always hold the shift key when you're designing something that's not supposed to move, and just resize around the center. Alright, I don't want this eye to be too big. And now we're gonna duplicate this, move it across to the right, then select both of them, go to align and distribute, choose biggest object and align horizontally, and then we're going to group these together and choose page and then align vertically, and there we go. So the eyes are in place. I'm not sure what emotion to give this face. Maybe happy, because happy is always good. Always good to be happy. So again, we're going to add another circle, and don't mind that he looks absolutely shocked right now. He's not. I'm just going to use a circle to create his mouth, or two circles really to create his mouth. So we add this one first, center on the page, then duplicate it, choose another color so you can see where it's going to end up. Let me just make sure stroke is off. And then what we're going to do now to add a happy face is we're going to move this circle up. And then we're going to resize it, again holding the shift key so that we don't lose that center axis. And then we're going to select the one below it, and in path we're going to use difference. So what difference does, it will basically cut one of these two paths according to the other one. So oh, bye Cassie, nice to have you, hope you have a good rest. And yes, I am enjoying sharing with everyone. That's one of my favorite things to do. I've always been told I'm a good teacher, but I ran from it and I'm finally doing it. So my family should be happy about that. And yeah, we're going to move this mouth up so that he doesn't look weird. He still looks a bit like an alien, but we'll try to make him look a little less alien shortly. So I'm going to resize this here from the center, make sure it's centered on the page vertically, well horizontally really, because, well yeah, sorry, again my directions mixed up there, but just make sure it's centered along the vertical axis. Right, that's what I was trying to remember. And now we're going to add a nose. For the nose, it doesn't have to be a circle, because that one element is different from everything else. Doesn't really have to be consistent. Well, doesn't have to be using commonality, sorry. It has to be consistent because everybody has the same nose, but it doesn't have design commonality with the rest of this design. For this I'm going to use calligraphic strokes, or what do they call it again? Right. Draw calligraphic or brush strokes. That's the tool I'm using. And I'm using my graphics tablet to draw it. Oh wait, I didn't plug it in. Just a second. I was wondering why the tablet wasn't responding, and it's because the USB cable's not in. Still not responding. Why is that? Oh, my system had decided to sleep for a second there. For some reason, did I plug in the wrong thing? For some reason, Inkscape is not detecting my graphics tablet today. and it was working earlier, so I'll just draw it with my hand. My mouse is not going to be as clean as if I use a graphics tablet, but no big deal. I'll figure it out later. Alright, so there, he has a nose, and it is in blue, but we'll fix that quickly. Just select black from over here, and there we go. Now, one of the cool things about Inkscape that I like is you can simplify a path using Control L. If you zoom into his nose, you'll see it's not very clean because my hand isn't that straight when I'm drawing with my mouse. Shades a little bit. So what we're going to do here is simplify using Control L. Makes his nose look a lot cleaner. And if you go into the node editor, you'll see it's a lot cleaner from that aspect as well. So if I undo this, you can actually get to watch the process take place. One of the reasons why you simplify to is that if you want to then edit these nodes, it's a whole lot easier than if you have a ton of nodes to work with. So let me just select these again and simplify some more. Sometimes the simplify tool doesn't really remove them any further, but it does try to smooth them out. Oops. My mouse needs new batteries too. I'll have to sort it out tomorrow. Couldn't do it today. So yeah, there we go. If you see the mouse jumping a little bit, I forgot to warn you about that. My batteries need changing. And when that happens, the mouse jumps all over the screen. So don't worry if that happens occasionally. Not a big deal. Just need to change the batteries. Okay, so next element we need to add now is some eye shine, as I like to call it. And to do that, we're going to add some more circles. We're going to choose blue for this so I can actually see where it goes. So add a circle in here, then duplicate it, which is Ctrl D on your keyboard. I'm going to make it red so I can see where the other circle is below it. I'm going to bring this down here. Select the blue circle and the red circle. If they're hard to select, just drag and select. And then I'm going to use difference again. And there you have it. Now if you don't want this to be so big, you can just move these nodes around a little bit. I'm going to simplify it just to smooth things out. Now if you're wondering, seeing as I said that we're doing consistency and commonality, you may be saying these are not really common elements anymore, but they are, because we started with circles. You still get the curvature of the original circle. Even if I move stuff around slightly, I don't want to do it too much because obviously then you lose that commonality, but we're going to just move things around slightly, just reshape them a little bit because we don't want to lose the commonality too much. But basically, once you make sure to start with the same elements, you end with the same elements. That's the basic concept behind that. I'm just shifting these a little bit, or skewing them really, using the same tool as select. You just click again and then you can skew them a little bit, because I just want them to be in the correct position. And I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. If you're not as perfectionist as me, you don't have to do all this. Still looks good, still looks cool. Alright, so now that this is in place, turn it white. Because another element that remains consistent in all of these designs in the Humanality Project is color. Eventually, I am planning to add color to them, but for now we're just working with black and white to keep things consistent. Okay, so now that this is in place, what we need to do is duplicate it, move it across to the right so that it's in his other eye. Then you select the other one, group them, and align to the biggest object, which should be the two of these. Not necessary to exactly have them in the center, but you can if you want them to be aligned perfectly. I'm just going to move them across a little bit because I don't want them exactly in the center. Doesn't look as cool to me in the exact center, but usually that's what I do. Alright, there we go. So now we have a somewhat happy looking face. Not quite as exquisite as the original faces I created for the project, but not too bad. So now let's give this person some hair. And to do that, we're going to create some more circles. Again, I'm using a temporary blue circle so I can see where it is. And this time around, we're actually going to make sure that they're consistent both in height and width. So to do that, you have radius X and radius Y. That's what our X and our Y are for. I set them both to 65, but you can use any number you want depending on how big you want the hair to be. And then I'm going to select 90% gray as the color. And I'm going to move them around the head of this figure. Duplicate. Move it up a little bit, resize it, again using the shift key, but before I do that, let me lock the axes, which would be width and height, and that's this button up here, by the way. So I'm going to select the shift key, resize, move it some more, duplicate again, move it up, duplicate again and put it up here. This one I want now to be centered on the page, so I'm going to choose page as the relative position, center it on the vertical axis, and then I'm going to select these three circles over here, group them, just shift them a little bit. Now why I group them as well is not only to move them, but I could also rotate them together. I accidentally just clicked into the group. I didn't want to do that. Alright, so now we're going to rotate this slightly. And then what we're going to do is ungroup and move these two behind the circle that contains the face. This shouldn't be transparent. Let me just fix that. Right. And if they're not in the position you want them to be, you can shift them around a little bit. I'm using my keyboard to do that now this time, so it's a little more precise. Now one of the things that I usually do as I'm designing is I stop and check and see that things look exactly as I want them, and if necessary I may move things around. Sometimes I even scrap the entire thing and start again. That's just part of the design process, so don't worry if you're watching a tutorial sometimes and somebody has to change things. If they're a designer worth their salt, that often happens. That's just a part of life. And I don't like to hide those things because sometimes when you're following tutorials, they're a little too perfect in my opinion. I don't like to hide all that all the time. If I'm doing a short tutorial, I'll obviously edit that out, but like on my streams and stuff, you all get to see the real deal. Okay, so now we're going to... Oops. Let me just make sure I didn't duplicate these yet. Okay, cool. So we're going to select these two circles on the side here, group them, duplicate them. Did they duplicate just now? I don't think so. No, they didn't. Okay, let me try that again. Right. Duplicate them and then rotate them on the Y axis, which is flip selected objects horizontally. Then we're going to select them. Face keeps wanting to be selected when I'm not trying to select that. Select them and move them over to this side. And once you have them in a relatively good position, move them to the bottom. Then select this group over here. Group the entire thing. Oh wait, I forgot. Before I do that, let me align them horizontally on the same level. So you have biggest object selected and all these selected, and then you just use center on horizontal axis. Now you group the entire thing, select page now as your relative position, and then center on the vertical axis. This circle over here, duplicate that, move it over, select the first one again, go back to biggest object, center on the horizontal axis, group both of them, then go back to page and center on the vertical axis, and there we go. So now this person's hair is in place. Then you can group the entire thing if you want and resize. I'm only grouping for the purpose of resizing, obviously. I don't want all of the hair to cover their face, but I need to resize, so I just group temporarily. Then you ungroup them, and then the ones that you want to move back, select those and move them backward. Come on, Inkscape, cooperate. I know it's a development build, but right, there we go. These I'm going to resize them a little bit as well, because I don't want them to cover the eyes. And I'm going to move them out to the sides a little more. And after I do this, always make sure that you double check on your position. So group them again, choose page and center on the vertical axis. Alright, there we go. So everything looks good there to me. What I am going to do, just to make sure that the eyes and other elements are not too close to the hair, is just select all these elements and move them down. Oops, I didn't mean to select the hair over there. So let me group these again. Alright, that's much better now. Okay, so there we have a face according to the same basic guidelines that I would have established when I was creating the original project. So let's compare and see just how similar they really are. I'm gonna exit full screen and drag it across. Now you see, not too bad. So there you go. That's how I basically would have created the original face for the Humanality project, and then I iterated from there. So you can see that by using common elements, which is all circles, and then keeping consistency, which is that all of my values remain similar and the colors remain similar, etc. Even though I did not exactly follow the same model that I used for the first face, they're still extremely similar. Now what I'm going to do is to show you how you can iterate from there and create some diversity. Now all of this is on one layer, but I'm going to move some of it down. So first I'm going to select everything, put it on layer 2, lock this. And I forgot to do something, so I'm going to do that now, which is on layer 1 I'm going to add a background. And if you're not designing like icons or anything like that, I usually suggest that you put a background in Inkscape. And of course, your default setup, if you're using Inkscape for the first time, will not have these layers. This is my default setup, but I would suggest adding some layers to your scene to keep things organized. So in layer 1 I'm going to add a background and center it to the page. Choose white as the color, and the reason for that is if I turn off this layer, you'll see that there is actually no color behind this image. Now if I were to export this image, it would open just fine in any program and it wouldn't have a background. I could then use it in websites, whatever. But when I'm doing, like, say a poster or you know, any other form of artwork that's supposed to have a solid background, you usually want to have that available, so that's why I added one just now. And Inkscape, when it exports most images, they're by default they're PNG, so if you export your PNG image with no background, it will be a transparent background, and then if you try to use it, say like as a flare or whatever, you may get some results you're not looking for. So anyway, that's just a side thing, a side note. Just keep that in mind. If you want to have a background, make sure to add it. And as you can see, I just turn it back on. Now there is a nice white background in the icon preview. This is just a little side note, and I hope you don't mind my side notes. My brain rambles a lot, so my apologies for those who like a little more streamlinedness, to coin a term. Anyway, so let us get back to it. I'm going to select everything here, make sure everything is grouped together, and align this to the center of the page altogether. Just makes things a little easier to work with, but not absolutely necessary. Now this layer I'm going to call base, and then this layer I'm going to call eyes. So the eyes I'm going to move to the layer called eyes. Let me just ungroup everybody now. Now if I turn off eyes, you'll see there are no eyes. And that gives us a nice template to work with for happy faces. Then from base I'm going to move out the mouth, and then call that mouth happy in parentheses. And now you have a blank face to work with eyes. And then the hair, now I'm going to leave the hair in place, because this time around I'm not changing the hair, but probably in a future session I'll show you how to do that. To save time today though, I'm not going to show you how to do diversity in the hair, because that's a little more complicated. Things have to be on different layers, etc., because you have some above his head and some below. So I'm going to lock the base now, turn off the mouth, and turn off the eyes. And I'm going to add a different set of eyes now, again using circles. Just make sure that circle is... Oops! I forgot I need to add a new layer. So let me add a layer for eyes, and this is going to be excited. Right, and then we can draw this in. Duplicate it. Move it across. In fact, no, let's not duplicate it and move it across. Let's create the excited eye first, and then we'll just duplicate that and put that on the other side. So as I said before, a red circle so I can see what I'm working with. Move that into position, and then difference. Now for an excited face, you can either leave it facing upward like this, or you can flip it and then rotate it, but usually I just leave them pointing upward like this. Human expressions are very diverse, so you can choose whatever you want to do, however you want to achieve that. I'm going to make it black, because as I said, the eyes are in black. If I turn back on the eyes here, you can see they're in black. I'm going to skew this a little bit. Then what I'm going to do is duplicate, flip, and move it across. And then I'm going to select both of them, choose biggest object, and align them on the horizontal axis. Then group them and align to the page itself. And then I'm going to resize them a little bit. Now to help me in terms of keeping these exactly in the position I want them, I can turn back on the eye layer below here. So let me call this standard, by the way. Move these down a little bit. Now if you want, you can actually, you see like how I have these here, you can actually reuse elements to simplify things. So like now this could become a sad or concerned face using the eyes from excited, which don't actually have any pupils or anything, and the eyes from standard. If I turn off the eyes from standard, now this person looks a little more happy. and I can actually turn the mouth back on and already have excited without even having to create a new mouth, right? But I'm going to duplicate the mouth actually, and again this is all design commonality and design consistency, and like I always say, stacking simplicity, keeping it very simple and iterating on that. So I'm going to call this now excited, make the layer visible, unlock it, and from here all I need to do is select this node and move it downward. I'm going to turn on auto smooth, keep things nice and smooth, and there you go. So now this person is excited. Now if you want, you can even make this a little more interesting. Now we're going to add eyes, excited, option 2. As a programmer, I would usually go with option 1 because this is option 0, but for the sake of those who are not programmers among us, I'm counting from 1 and going up to 2. So now we're going to add a circle again, keeping in mind that we're always using common elements. Now just to make sure that these eyes remain close to where the original eyes are, I turn back on that layer below and shift these up a little bit so that they remain in a consistent position. Let me make this blue so I can see where it is. Right, so I'm putting this along the edge of the eye below it, and then I'm going to turn this layer back off. Then you duplicate, move this across, and just to make sure that everything remains in exact position, group, wait, before I group, let me align horizontally. Always need to remember the steps. Align horizontally, group, and then align vertically, and there we have it. Now if I wanted it again, I can leave these in place even with the color if I wanted to diversify this even more, depending on what the project is. But to remain consistent with my own guidelines and my own rules that I set for myself, I'm going to turn this back off and turn these to black. And just a side note, one of the things you always want to do when you're designing is set some rules for yourself. You can then become a little more flexible to make things more diverse, to make things more interesting. And when I do a future course, I'll explain some principles that I work with. That would be, I call them comfort areas, but they're centrality, novelty, and there's a third one. I can't remember the third one. I need to look back at my own notes. But basically that would be an example of novelty, that you have certain rules that you work with and then you can, you know, change them up a little bit, but you always want to keep some foundational rules when you're doing any design so that your designs remain consistent. That's one of the marks of a good designer, in my opinion at least. Obviously there is diversity in life, and so not everyone follows their same exact rules, but I would advise you, if you're designing for, say, like work or whatever, make sure that you keep some degree of consistency so that if anyone looks at your designs, even if they don't know that they're yours, that there is something recognizable about them. That's what I would suggest. Okay, so that side note aside, let me add some more diversity to this. So above mouth excited, I'm going to add creases excited. Now what I'm going to do is actually from the eyes, I'm going to ungroup this. I'm going to select one of these, duplicate it, move it down here and resize. Once I've resized it, then I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to move this then to the layer that says creases excited. Then duplicate again, move it down, resize this one a bit. Alright, I need to zoom in at this point so it's easier to work with. I'm just going to skew this. Now the reason why I duplicated from the eyes up here is, again, commonality, using the same elements. So I'm using the same element, but I'm reshaping it slightly, and that gives my designs a degree of commonality. Everything is recognizable, even though you're not consciously thinking of it. Basically, one of the things I like to do is to trick the brain. That's one of the basic core concepts of all design, is to trick your brain into seeing things that aren't really there, or sometimes just to hack your brain in a sense, so that you're reusing the same elements to achieve very different things. So that's what I'm doing here. Now, in terms of color, I'm going to make this lighter because the creases are not the mouth itself exactly, so I'm going to use 80% gray on those. You may need to tweak them a little bit some more just to get it to look exactly as you want. And the reason I'm using these creases, by the way, if you haven't realized, is to create an elderly person, so that you have the same basic structure of that person's face that you would have had from before, and now you have the diversity of age and even gender, all those things you can create very quickly using the same elements over and over and over again. Saves you time, saves you effort, and it keeps things consistent. Now if we zoom out, right there you have some wrinkles on this person's face. Still isn't exactly as I want it, because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, but hey, at least it doesn't look too bad. Your opinion may vary, you can let me know what you think, but I think it could do with a little bit more work in my personal opinion, but that's just me. Alright, so we're going to turn the creases off, turn the mouth off, and now I'm going to use this same template here from eyes, excited, and the second option, and I'm going to add a new mouth altogether. So I'm going to add a new layer, and now I'm going to turn this person who is excited into someone who is concerned. So I'm going to add a new circle here. Make sure it's black because the mouth is always black. Duplicate that, turn it to a different color so I can see what I'm working with. Let me rotate this a little bit. Then we're going to use difference to cut that path. Skew this until I get the result that I'm looking for. Let me turn off snapping for a moment. And now I'm moving this to one side, but still using the same basic shape that I would have had from before. And this time when I resize, I wasn't holding shift, because shift resizes from the center and I didn't want to do that. So now this person looks like they're witnessing something that has them a little bit disturbed. Now we're going to add some creases for this person to give them some edge, or just to give them a little more expression if you want to call it that as well. So I duplicated creases from excited, and I'm going to now rename this to concerned. Make it visible. Now this looks like a guy with a mustache. But we're going to just move some stuff around. rotate it a little bit, put it down here. There you go. So now our friend is concerned about something, and they're really concerned because they have creases and everything around their mouth. This is, whatever they're witnessing is terrible. So we're going to turn that off. And now we're going to create one that is surprise. And again, I'm not changing these eyes at all. The eyes from excited still remain the same. And I'm going to add a new layer. Call this surprised. And all you need is a simple circle. Now this can be slightly off center as well. That goes back to one of the principles I talked about earlier, which is novelty. And well, I'll leave that for a later stream. It was going to explain the way I call them comfort areas and all that, but I'll leave that for a later stream. Possibly also put that on my YouTube channel in more detail, so you can look forward to that. I'll plug for that a little bit. Look forward to that coming in the near future. Okay, so there we have a surprise mouth, but this time I'm going to add another feature, and I'm not going to put it as a crease because I want this to be part of the surprise mouth altogether. So I'm adding another circle which is close to the original, both in shape and in position. Then I'm going to duplicate it, give it a different color so I can see where I'm working. Rotate it slightly. Trying to get the exact shape that I'm seeing in my mind first before I actually cut this. Now, a small tip I'll put in here for those who are not that familiar with design or not very talented or whatever, because not all of us have the same gifts, not all of us have the same talents, and not everyone is as skilled as anyone else. So if you struggle with design, sometimes one of the tips I'll give you, you can go to anywhere that you can find designs, like OpenClipArt or just Google whatever, and look for something that looks like what you're trying to achieve, and you don't have to copy verbatim, but you can at least look at what it consists of, try to find the basic lines that it is made up of, and then duplicate those in some sort of fashion. And you can practice that on your free time, and trust me, it helps your design capabilities and process. And you can even do that just, you know, at random without any particular purpose, and then rest on it, because believe it or not, sleep is one of the most critical aspects of everything we do. Your brain will actually sit and go back through everything that you did and clear the garbage, and this is very literal. Your brain literally clears out garbage, just like how in programming you have a garbage collector to clear out from whatever is left behind. Your brain will clear out all the trash, rearrange everything, and improve your skills. So take some time to practice, look at what other designers do sometimes, and then sleep on it, and then try again. Okay, so this component now I'm going to just try to position it exactly as I want it. And this time I'm going to choose a much lighter grey. Let me see, about 30%. Let me just zoom out to see how this comes out. Alright, I'm going to need to make it slightly lighter than that. Yeah, 20% should do. So there we go. Now it looks like they're not just surprised and shocked, but their mouth is actually opening. Now, of course, for the Humanality Project, I'm not going for exact realism, but you should still try to achieve some degree of realism in most designs so that things are recognizable to your brain. Okay, that's one of the things I always try to emphasize. Hack the brain. Okay, so that is done. Let me think of if there are any other expressions that I can add to this face. Oh, I know what I'll do here. I'm going to turn off option number 2. Let me see what some of these other things look like. That's a nice one. Okay, so option number 1. That should give me a good point to go from. I'm not going to name this particular layer because I'm not really sure what to call it yet. So, well, I'm not going to name anything specific. So I'll just say we'll figure it out. And this is one of the ways that you can iterate on your design. Sometimes just play around, see what comes to mind, and if you like it, you keep it. If you don't like it, you discard it, but at least you learn something along the way. So again, adding a circle. Make it black. And at this point, I'm just playing to see what comes out. This is one of the methods that I use personally. It's a very professional method, trust me. Now another thing that is a common and consistent element in the Humanality Project is spacing. So there's always going to be space between the mouth of whatever face you're designing and the face itself. So I'm not leaving this here. I'm going to move it up. Now clearly whatever she's seeing is disappointing to her and her ancestors. Now let's make her angry. So I'm going to add eyes, angry. Well, in fact, I'm going to call this eyebrows angry, and I'm going to keep the standard eyes for this one. Again, I'm going to create a circle. I was going to draw calligraphic strokes, but instead I'm going to use circles because I want to keep consistency. Using the same method as before, we're going to cut this circle along a particular line. Now if necessary, I may need to resize the circle I'm trying to cut as well. Alright, that looks like a good approximate shape there. And then difference, and we just need to put these in place. She is not happy about whatever she is seeing. Now for a little bit of novelty, what we're going to do is we're going to move these here slightly out of place so they're not exactly in the same horizontal position, but we are going to group them and align vertically so that everything remains consistent in terms of that they're still centered at the end of the day. Now we're soon done here because I don't want this stream to go too long, and I don't want to lose your, well, I don't think I'm losing your interest. This is pretty interesting, but I don't want you to lose any of what I'm teaching today, so I'm going to keep it kind of short. And you can always join me again on a future stream where I will be continuing. So seeing as we have so many faces, I'm going to just run back through what we can do with them. Let's see what happens if I change the eyes around a little bit. That looks pretty funny. You can change the mouth. So you see how you can get different expressions. That looks pretty mean. I would not trust this person. And this person doesn't need a mouth. Right, so you can see how you can get some different options and you can iterate on some very simple and very basic features, some very basic elements, and you can create all sorts of diversity and still maintain consistency, and you can still maintain commonality. So that's the basis of what the Humanality Project will do, will teach you to do, and you'll be able then to recreate this in all sorts of ways to use in your own designs. And from here I'm then going to be creating a web, well, it's actually going to be a CSS framework, so let me call it that, not just a web site or a website template, but I'm actually going to create a CSS framework for this called Humanality as well, of course. And then from that we're going to create a web page template and a number of other things depending on what I feel like doing as I go along. And all of those will be made available via my website and also my GitLab account. I have not been active on there, but I will be getting back active and making everything available. Everything will be open source and you'll be able to reuse it. And I'm also going to post all of these on my YouTube channel, so make sure that you subscribe. Let me pull that up for you. Make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel and my Twitch channel so that you don't miss anything. Okay? Okay, so all that said, let's hop back over to Inkscape. Now another thing that I would have done here, which I'll probably cover in a future stream, is that in the actual design for the project I have some text and stuff like that, and you'll notice that they use the same colors but they use different fonts. But I still kept some consistency and commonality in that spacing is similar between the words and shapes are similar to what I have here. And then of course the fonts on different lines are always, you know, a particular font or whatever. So all of that I'll break down as we go through this project in the future, and I'll show you how to keep consistency and still have diversity. Okay, but I hope you learned something today. I am going to cut it short here. I'm just going to run through again quickly some basic concepts, and that is that we're stacking simplicity. That's the basis of everything. We are using design commonality, which is elements always remain the same and don't change, and we are keeping consistency so that when you look at anything that is designed according to your basic rules that you establish for yourself, that is always recognizable as being the same. Okay, so all of that said, I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you follow, all that good stuff. Share with a friend, let somebody know, and give me your suggestions as well. I absolutely covet your suggestions and your feedback, so I know what you need some help in. And if you need personal assistance, you can contact me on my social media. If you're in Barbados and you want to be trained personally, you can also contact me via Facebook, WhatsApp, Telegram, Twitter, Instagram. Pretty much I'm on everything. So if you want to contact me and you're in Barbados and you want personal training one-on-one, we can arrange that and I can show you how to do some pretty epic designs. Okay, and if you need a designer, you know where to find me. So yeah, all that said, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.